Chapter 7. A blade to the heart, Sevyn barked, grabbing Honey's arm with a firm, urgent grip and pulling her away from Alabasandria. "Chill, Honey! You're about to snap!" The demon's frail, battered body hung limply from the chains, her skin slick with sweat and blood, eyes fluttering as she clung to consciousness. The basement was dark, lit by a single flickering bulb that cast sharp shadows across the rough concrete floor and the maze of rusted pipes above. Honey's eyes burned with wild intensity, her face caught between rage and grief as she glared at her captive, fists clenched at her sides. Alabasandria's chest rose and fell in ragged, trembling breaths as she stared at Honey with a mix of terror and defiance. "She deserves to die. I'll do it myself if I must," Honey shouted, her voice raw and shaking with adrenaline. Her heart pounded in her ears, fueling her anger until it nearly burst out. She trembled with rage, every muscle tense as she fought Sevyn's grip, her face flushed and eyes burning. "Honey, breathe! We need intel, not a corpse!" Sevyn snapped, stepping between her and the demon. His voice shook with urgency, sweat on his brow. "If I weren't here, you'd finish her off before we got any answers. Is this what you want the High Council to see? You worked too hard for that seat. Don't throw it away now." He stood firm, making Honey look at him. "Maybe I should thank you," Honey muttered, her voice rough as her anger faded. She looked down, shoulders slumping. "I lost my temper, but I'm a mother, Sevyn. To me, she's a monster, a predator who took innocent lives." The flickering light showed the struggle of grief, guilt, and vengeance on Honey's face. "True, but we need answers about Sebastian. That's what matters most," Sevyn said, his voice tight with desperation. "Exactly. Plus, it looks like you haven't unlocked the medallion yet." "Want some pointers?" Honey asked, excitement flickering back in her eyes. "Wait, was that a test? If you want to check my night vision, say so. I almost died," Sevyn blurted, frustration clear in his voice. "Please, you were fine. I had it under control," Honey smirked. "But your eyes don't glow. Do you know why?" Her curiosity grew sharper. "No idea. But I'm listening if you know," Sevyn replied. Curiosity peaked even in the chaos. "I'll explain, but first, let's deal with Alabasandria. Finding Sebastian is the priority," Honey said, her voice firm with determination. Suddenly, Honey pulled aside a dusty tarp and revealed a heavy car battery, a mess of jumper cables, and a thick iron chain, all hidden in the shadows like tools for torture. Sevyn stared, wide-eyed, his heart racing as Honey crouched and wrapped the chain around Alabasandria's ankles with steady, precise hands. The metal links clanked on the concrete as she tightened them, her face hard with determination. "What the hell?" he gasped, horror growing as she grabbed a remote control with worn buttons. She pressed the button, and the heavy metal hook swung above them, casting a threatening shadow. With expert precision, Honey hooked the chains onto the rusted pulley device bolted overhead. She pressed a button on the remote, and the mechanism whined, slowly hoisting Alabasandria's body upward until her toes barely brushed the floor. A surge of grim exhilaration flashed through Honey's eyes as she crouched beside the car battery, attaching the jumper cables to the chain. Sparks spat and crackled, briefly lighting the basement in a harsh blue glare, casting monstrous shadows that crawled up the walls and across Sevyn's face. "All right, time for answers," Honey said with a wild look in her eyes. "Who knew interrogations could be this electrifying?" "Fun? How is torturing someone supposed to be amusing?" Sevyn asked, raising an eyebrow at Honey's actions. Honey's lips curled into a wicked smirk, her eyes shining with a wild spark. "I can show you better than I can tell you," she said, her voice full of dark satisfaction. She snapped the jumper cables onto the chains, and the battery buzzed to life. A surge of electricity shot through Alabasandria's body. The demon's muscles jerked, her back arching as she screamed, the sound echoing off the stone walls and hanging in the thick air. "Wake up, this is urgent. Tell us where Sebastian is. You took him last year," Honey demanded, her voice sharp as the demon's cries filled the musty room. "You really expect me to remember something from that long ago? That's impossible," Alabasandria stammered, her eyes darting in panic as she searched for any way out. "That's the wrong answer. Think carefully about your next move," Honey snapped, her determination clear as she reattached the cables to the chain, her eyes full of resolve. Sevyn recoiled, wrinkling his nose as a wave of rotten sulphurous stench hit him, making the air even heavier. "That smell! It's unbearable," he choked out, struggling not to gag as the foulness seemed to stick to his skin and clothes. Honey chuckled. "It's a demon thing. All Garnet warriors have a keen sense of smell, enabling them to track demons. But if it's too much for you, you can step outside. It's only going to get worse," she teased, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Thanks, but I can't take my eyes off you, not even for a second. You might go too far with Alabasandria before we get what we need," Sevyn said, jaw tight as he grabbed the cables with determination. Honey grinned and lifted her chin, giving Sevyn a sideways look as she noticed how pale he was. She pushed Alabasandria's limp body closer, the demon's stench growing stronger and making the basement air even harder to breathe. "You might be right, but how long can you handle this, tough guy? I know the smell is awful, but if you're staying, let's make a bet. If I get answers before you lose your lunch, I'll teach you how to use that garnet medallion you're so interested in. I've learned more tricks than you'd think from those old scrolls you found," she said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Sevyn braced himself and stepped closer. "We'll see about that. I'm not leaving." He put the cables back on, the metal clinking in the quiet room. Honey raised an eyebrow, her voice full of sarcasm. "You're tough, but how long can you act like this doesn't bother you? Didn't you almost throw up a minute ago?" "I'm still good," Sevyn shot back, trying to sound confident, even as the smell got worse and his stomach twisted. Honey leaned in, her eyes burning with intensity. "So, what's it going to be, Alabasandria? Will you tell us your secrets, or do I need to turn up the heat for real? If I knew which brat you wanted, I'd let the world burn before giving you a name." Alabasandria spat, her voice jagged with bravado, a mask barely hiding the tremor of dread running beneath, defiance and desperation tangled in her gaze, wild and storm-bright. Honey's grin curled with predatory delight. "Bold to the bitter end, makes the spectacle worth every second." She twisted the dial, and electricity leapt, blue fire hissing as cables bit into the chains, a symphony of torment waiting to erupt. The stench and horror overwhelmed Sevyn. He staggered from the room, retching into the shadows as the world spun, and the memory of burning flesh seared itself into his mind. "We want Khan Shamel's grandchild. You took him. No more riddles." Honey's voice sliced through the air, steel-edged and cold. She unclipped the cables with the precision of a surgeon, ready to drag the interrogation into darker depths. Tension thrummed, their hunt balancing on the knife edge of nightmare, shadows thickening as the air grew charged with unspoken threats. Alabasandria clamped her mouth shut, then spat blood at Honey's feet, her eyes burning with the last embers of rebellion. In a blink, Honey, the three-eyed owl, became a tempest. Fists crashed down, every blow a thunderclap of grief and vengeance. Alabasandria's head snapped back, pain tearing raw sounds from her throat as Honey's fury splattered the floor in crimson. Each strike was a curse, a storm, a hymn of violence sung in red. Adrenaline surged. Honey's hands shook with rage, hope, and exhaustion as she twisted the dial. The cables hissed, chains blushed demon red, a dark lullaby humming in the gloom. Electricity crawled along Alabasandria's skin, wrenching every muscle into a rictus of pain. The air itself seemed to shudder, the basement a crucible of vengeance and primal crackling power. A grim truth fell on Alabasandria. Doom poised above her like the blade of an executioner. The agony became a tide, burning through her bones, and she knew Honey would twist the dial forever unless the truth was torn from her soul. "Stop, please!" Alabasandria's voice cracked, words battered by terror, body writhing in the grip of pain. Steam boiled from red-hot chains, ghost mist swirling through the dungeon's flicker and gloom. Her skin shone with agony, every breath a gasp. The child! Sebastian Wayne! His name was written on the nursery wall. I swear! Her heart hammered panic in her chest. Now the Cambion she was sent to kill seemed as doomed as she was, both of them tangled in a web of powers too vast and cruel to comprehend. "See? That wasn't so hard," Honey purred, a victorious fire kindling in her eyes. "You claimed your mind was a blank. What lit the match for you?" "He reeks of his grandfather's power," Alabasandria gasped, voice threadbare with terror and fatigue. Her eyes darted, seeking mercy in Honey's stone gaze. "You can't imagine what would happen if I even breathed his air. I swear, I never harmed him." Panic flooded her words, bravado drowning beneath the weight of fate, her mission pressed on her soul like a tombstone. "But you hunted him," Honey pressed, voice relentless, stitching accusation and prophecy together. "Why target Khan Shamel's bloodline? Who gave the order?"